Y'all see that fly flying around? If it lands on my head, I need somebody to tell me. Now I have even more to be nervous about. I'm terrified. Every time I get up to be in front of somebody else, I'm always scared that I'm going to leave my fly down. And now I was watching that fly and I thought, I don't want to be a meme for the next 2 weeks. If you want to open up your Bibles to Joshua chapter 24. Joshua chapter 24, we are going to do one more lesson in this. No, I guess that's not right. We have 2 more lessons in Joshua 24. Joshua 24 has really been our outline for this section. And I think that I may, let's see, 1 second. Just give me 1 second. It looks like I've got an issue with my... Isn't that just awesome? Got a backup. Always have a backup. That's what I do. In Joshua chapter 24, Joshua says in verses 14 and 15, this is familiar ground. Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river. That was the first thing that we talked about. We talked about the gods of your fathers. We talked about family as idolatry. And if you just think about it in this way, this is the way that I've kind of worked it out in my head, is to think about whether it be my wife or your husband or your kids or the idea of family. And I talked about one of the situations that I grew up in where you say family first before anything at all costs. To make family your meaning and your fulfillment and your purpose in life is to make family an idol. And so we talked about the gods of your fathers. He says, the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt. That's what we talked about last time. We talked about the things that our eyes crave. And so last time we talked about the gods of Egypt and putting those things away, not pursuing those different things. He says, and serve the Lord. In verse 15, if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites. That's the third category, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And he says, with the Amorites, he said, in whose land you dwell. So with the Amorites, we're not going to think about this in terms of the gods of our fathers, family stuff, not the gods of our past. My own temptation with Egypt, the things that my eyes crave. We're going to talk about the Amorites, the gods of the land, the gods in whose land you dwell. And so this lesson will be about the world. That's the way that the Bible often describes it. What is, or what are the gods of the world? And you can see through a couple of different places, as in Leviticus chapter 18 and verses 1 through 5 is one of these, that God was constantly saying things that we as parents say to our kids, and that is, it's the if everybody else is jumping off a bridge, don't jump off a bridge. Don't go along. Don't be the person who is influenced by the world around you. You be separate from them. And it's not just a lesson from parents to kids. It's something for all of us as Christians. And so Leviticus 18 and verses 1 through 5. I've got some introduction stuff that I'm going to hurry through. That's why I'm trying to move quick, because I want to get to the discussion part. Leviticus 18, 1 through 5. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt where you lived, and you shall not do as they do in the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing you. You shall not walk in their statutes. You shall follow my rules and keep my statutes and walk in them. I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my rules. If a person does them, he shall live by them. I am the Lord. Serve me, not the gods of your past and not the gods of your future in the land where you're going to live. I think that I read this 3 lessons ago. Whenever I did this I did all of the gods the gods of your fathers, the gods of Egypt, the gods of the Amorites, and rather to serve God. I did all of that in one lesson 3 lessons ago. And I think I read this last time, but this is just a quote on idolatry that paints a picture that Israel is just like us. They have lots of opportunities. They have lots of gods and lots of directions and lots of temptations that are pulling at them in every direction in the world that they live in. I'm just going to read it because it really paints a picture. Israel was in close political, social, and economic contact with Syria, Phoenicia, Philistia, Canaan. Thus, it was widely exposed to foreign gods. All of those people had their own gods, and they surround Israel, and all of those gods are pulling at Israel and tempting Israel all the time. It says also Israel was situated on the main route between Egypt in the south, from Egypt to get to the Near East, where the Hittites are in the north, the Assyrians are a little to the east, the Babylonians are a little farther east than that. And so Israel has frequent contact with these people. Talks about their Mesopotamian background. That's the gods of their fathers that we already talked about. And so, don't think for one second that this is thousands of years old stuff that biblical people are living in and dealing with, and that it's completely different from me and my circumstances. God's people in Israel had to live in the world surrounded by sinful influences just like we do. Just because you leave your home and go to work in a workplace that may not be a God-centered workplace doesn't mean that you're experiencing something nobody else has ever experienced. Israel lived like this. I showed you this picture before. I didn't want to leave it out. A couple years ago, I went to the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and this is some stuff that was found in Israel from the time that God's people should have known better. You find all kinds of examples of Jewish people worshiping other gods. And so I'll finish with this by way of introduction. I think in a couple of these past lessons I've quoted from David Foster Wallace. He is the guy who said the things about idolatry. He said, we may not even know about the forces that are pulling on us. And this was a graduation speech, a commencement speech, and the way that his commencement speech opens, I think is at least worth talking about. He says there were 2 fish swimming along, and they passed an older fish swimming in the opposite direction, and the older fish said, "Good morning, boys, how's the water?" And they all nodded at each other and kept swimming in their own direction. And a little way down the road, the 2 younger fish looked at each other and said, "What's water?" And that's the whole point of this commencement address. Do you think a fish who lives in water and is surrounded by water knows what water is? It's kind of like us living in oxygen and breathing it, requiring it for life, but are you conscious that it's around you right now? Before I said it, were you? It's the world that we live in. These are the forces that surround us and tug on us every single day of our lives. And so, one more time, I say that we talk about this in biblical terms. We call it the world. And so, here's what I want to ask from the very start of this. What are these forces? What are the gods of the land? And maybe you'll have one that I don't have on my screen, and we can talk about that. But we've talked about family, and we've talked about all of these other different things that serve as idols. What are the real American idols? And before you raise your hand and start contributing, let me come over here to this side of the room. This would be a really good time for one of you younger folks to have an easy question. This is low-hanging fruit for you. What do you think are the gods that people in our world serve and worship? Yeah, Lou? Okay, social media. What do you think it is? It doesn't have to just be restricted to this group up here. I mean, it's not like we're bowing down and worshiping social media. What is the thing about social media that consumes us? Like, what's behind it? What's under it? The platform is just that. It's the idol. But what is the God that stands behind the idol? Yeah, John? Sorry? That's certainly one of the problems with it. It's one of the flaws. Did you say time commitment? Yeah, one of the flaws is that it consumes us. And that's one of the ways that we can identify it as an idol, is to say, here's this thing that I'm devoting my life to. And all of that. Is that you, Mark, or did it go off? Cut out? No? Okay, Ben, what do you got? Huh? You got to talk louder, homie. Here's what I hear you say. This is what we do in our house a lot of the time. When people talk to me, I repeat what I think you said. And Becky always rolls her eyes at me and says, you cannot possibly think that I just said those words. I'm not going to do that to you right now. But help me out. What did he say? Somebody lower your mask and help me out.
Fame.
Fame. That makes a whole lot more sense than what I thought you said. I'll leave it to you to figure out what was going through my head and thinking, surely Ben did not just say that. Yeah, Ben, we're going to talk about that one tonight. Fame. The idea of fame and success, riches, fortune, to be at the top of the pile. Some of the rest of you now can jump in. Dave?
I was thinking about what Luke said of social media and what's the root behind it. And I was thinking it goes along with being in this American culture or North American, with our right as freedom of speech. And the assumption is that everybody's voice matters. But it doesn't.
Turns out I'm not the most important person in the universe.
Yeah, and that's what social media does, is it provides a platform for the intelligent and the ignorant to come on the same platform and duke it out.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to focus and to elevate and to exalt myself. Me. Surely I'm important enough that my voice matters. It's an opportunity for me to showcase myself. Tim, did you have something?
A lot of it is instant gratification.
Okay. Instant gratification. What are some things attached to that?
Well, you get reaction. You get a lot of, to Dave's point. I'm spewing out this enormous wisdom that I've built up over my anywhere from 14 to 80 years to share with you, because I've done all the study and I'm an expert on this, and this. And boom, here it is.
Yeah.
And it's sort of that instant gratification from other people that either agree with you or don't, that you get that reaction. And I think a lot of it is, whether it's controversial issues or not, you want to see a video on such and such, boom, there it is. You want to see a website on such and such, boom, there it is. You want information on this, boom, there it is. And it's all right there at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Instant gratification.
Yeah. Right now. That I think is the root cause of a lot of these things that we're going to be talking about, instant gratification. I'm going to just roll through my list here, and I really do crave, I've left my notes kind of bare on some of these things. I've got 4 things that I want to point to that I think are American idols. There's another one that I'm going to leave off the list. I'm not going to talk about sex tonight, because we have a mixed audience of people who I'm not sure I want to go down that road with just yet. You can criticize me for that if you want, but that might be a good conversation if we're talking about idolatry and American idols. It might be a good conversation worth having, but it's not one that I want to have in this environment. But I've got money. I'm going to talk about money. I'm telling you these on the front side so you can be thinking about What do you see connected with idolatry and worship and a sense of fulfillment and purpose and meaning? Those things that only God gives us. How might money fill that role? I want to talk about bins, fame, success, my career, climbing the ladder, all of the things that might go into that category to get to the top. With that one, we'll talk about the rich young ruler. I want to talk about busyness and our calendars and our to-do list. Those things that we literally devote ourselves to. That's what it means to serve a God, is to be devoted to and to sacrifice to something. I sacrifice my time, and in some cases I sacrifice my family and my kids in order to, certainly in some cases I sacrifice God in order to serve my things, doing my stuff and doing it well. My calendar and my to-do list and the concept of busyness. And I want to finish with politics. Underneath the political idol or the political god. That one might not just be readily apparent what I want to talk about, but the 4 things that I want to hit tonight. Are there any others that you want to talk about, or anything that just immediately comes to your head as we think about the American?
I think this maybe goes along with what Tim said, but just I think we see a lot of people just serving themselves. And so that may be touched on in some of those first 3 you say, but like that seems to be the root of it, is like, I'm going to do what's best for me. I'm the most important person on the planet kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, when you talk about self, it's instant gratification and the self and me, and I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my stuff and build bigger barns because I have many days. All this me, self. I wonder if we definitely should connect this idea with baptism and what it means to become a Christian when you say, I'm dying to the old self. I'm putting those things in the grave where dead things go, and when I come up, I'm devoted to God now. So all under the same umbrella. Good, that we're talking about. Let's talk about money. Number 1, if you want to turn in your Bible to Matthew chapter 6 and verse 24. While you're turning there, I'm going to read a quote from Mark Twain. Some men worship rank, some worship heroes, some worship power, some worship God. And over these ideals they dispute and cannot unite, but they all worship money. I'm a little bit surprised, in fact, that I said, what are the American idols? I'm a little bit surprised that money is not the first thing that somebody said. It seems to be pretty standard, pretty universal. Would somebody please read Matthew 6, verse 24, nice and loud for us?
No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money.
Okay. Jesus never directly spoke to idolatry. But it sounds an awful lot like he was thinking of it to me. You can't serve 2 masters. You're either going to be devoted to the one or devoted to the other. And then he said, serve. You're either going to serve God or you're going to serve, he said, mammon, physical possessions, wealth, or money. My count is correct. Jesus told 38 parables, 38 stories to make a point. Of those 38, how many do you think dealt specifically with money?
Over half.
6. Morgan guessed 6. Dave says over half. 16. Start thinking about the proportion of that, of the things that Jesus taught and the things that Jesus said. You know, we can think about sin and evil and salvation and the Pharisees and the scribes and all of these different things that Jesus had to teach. Of 38 parables, 16 had to do specifically with money and the way that we treat in regard to money. Look at Luke chapter 12 and verse 31. This is at least one passage we're thinking of. in this regard. Luke chapter 12 and verse 31. Here is what I was thinking of, Tim, whenever you were talking about self-gratification, and Becky mentioned the idea of self and me and me and me. Starting in verse 13, that's really where this section begins, in my opinion. Luke chapter 12, starting in verse 13, someone in the crowd said, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbiter over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentiful. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." Do you see the eat, drink, and be merry part, and how we might think about that in relation to idolatry? This is the thing that's going to provide for me. This is the thing that's going to give me my sustenance, eat and drink and be merry, my money. And not only that, the be merry part of that is this is the thing that's going to give me a sense of happiness and fulfillment in my life. And God says to this person, you are completely mixed up in how you think about life and your priorities. And so in verse 22, I feel like Jesus turns his attention to begin specifically criticizing me. He says, therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. For life is more than food, and body is more than clothing. And he goes on to talk about how God is the one. God will care for you. It's his promise that God provides for us the things that we need in life. And so he ends in verse 31 by saying, instead, seek his kingdom and these things will be added to you. Our pursuit in life is not constantly, wholly, entirely directed towards more stuff. The American dream, having more and making more and getting more. Our pursuit in life should be seeking first the kingdom of God. That's what we've been saying all along with idolatry. God first. Nothing else comes before God. Anything you want to say about that, Jake?
A couple months ago, I was getting ready to get married, and I was getting ready to do all these things, and I was working at Home Depot, as a college graduate, just getting ready to get married, and I found myself with all the things that I had to work on before I could get married, I found myself just thinking 90% of the time about, I'm not making enough money. And it's easy to trick yourself into thinking like, I'm thinking this for a good reason. Like I was thinking I need to make more money so that I can provide for my soon-to-be wife. But I found myself in the middle of the day, in the middle of worship, in the middle of anything, conversation with Katie even, just it eating at the back of my mind, like, I'm not providing, I'm not doing enough, I'm not making enough, I'm not, and it's like, it's so easy to think like, money can be such a good thing, but it also is like, you need, like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's just like so easy to trick yourself into thinking that providing is the main thing that you need to be doing. And I think that in itself is an idol, is like your role and your responsibility. And I think for men, money is a huge one in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you're talking about, especially when you use the words, it's easy to trick yourself. That is the what is water question. Where's my heart really? What's really pulling at me with this conversation? That's a good thought, Jake. And I think that, I can't say most, I can talk about myself, but I've been in that same spot and feeling down. And I think, why am I feeling down? Serving God. Am I feeling down because I don't have as much as I think I should or want? Other thoughts about money? Yeah, Ben?
So I think the reason why it's so easy to idolize money is like Jake was saying, you can see what it's a physical thing. You can see it. You can see what I guess you would say rewards it gives you, as instead of God, you can't see Him, and you can't necessarily see the rewards. But if you believe in Him,
Yeah, that's good. Money is tangible and you can measure your progress. Let's move with that. Ben, let's go into the next one here because I think that I'm putting everything. Ben said fame. I'm putting success in here and I'm putting career, pursuing the career. If you are not able to see the screen, let's see. I've got some verses under there and they might be small. You might not be able to see that anyway. Matthew 19, Mark chapter 10, Luke chapter 18. 3 Gospels that tell the same story. In Matthew's Gospel, he is described, this fellow that we're talking about here, is described, Matthew chapter 19 and verse 22, when the young man heard that he went, what Jesus said, the young man heard what Jesus told him, which we'll talk about in just a minute. It says he went away sorrowful, and it says because he had great possessions. In Luke chapter 18 and verse 18, he's referred to as a ruler. These are 3 words that describe everything that some people are striving for. He's rich, he's young, and he's powerful. I can't think of a better way to illustrate this story with talking about these things and what I think I see as an American Idol and what people are pursuing. I want that money. I want that youth and everything that goes along with the youth. I personally don't know about that yet because I'm not old to think about it, but many of you do. I know intimately. Tim, you feel about this looking back. I see that you're not wearing your spectacles back there, but your brother is. And yeah, no. To be rich, to be young, to be powerful. It's the pursuit. It's the thing. And you know, you've seen it. And this fella comes to Jesus and he says, he reveals his heart. He reveals his mindset. And he says to Jesus, I have checked all of the boxes. What is the thing left that I need to do in order to be right with God? I'm paraphrasing, of course, if you know the story, but he asked Jesus, what do I need to do in order to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, boom, 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 here are the commandments of God. And he says, I've done it all. What else? What else do I need to do? Mark says something about this situation that none of the other gospel writers say. And I want to ask this question. I asked this to Becky earlier. In Mark chapter 10 and verse 21, listen to the way that Mark says Jesus' words. Jesus, looking at him, loved him. None of the other gospels include that part. But Mark tells us that Jesus loved him when he says it. Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, you lack one thing. Go sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me. This is a 100% frivolous opinion question. Why do you think Mark felt compelled to let us know that Jesus loved him? I don't know the answer to this question, but it stands out to me. When you compare Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and the other Gospels say that Jesus looked at him and said, this is what you need to do, sell your stuff. But Mark said that Jesus looked at him and he loved him. And he said, this is what you need to do. Go sell your stuff. What do you think's going on there, Cal?
I think that anyone else who had rich youth and power wouldn't have been asking Jesus that question. I don't lack anything. What do I need? I've got it all. But the young man he knew he lacked something. And he was asking Jesus, what do I need to do? I think he already knew what he needed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is this kind of the direction that you're going? Anybody else who was a rich young ruler, those 3 things, would not have come to Jesus in the first place because he already has everything that he needs. And so it's almost a sense of appreciation that Jesus is like, yes, yes, you are a rich young ruler, but yet here you are seeking after eternal things with me. And so, yes, Jesus is articulating his love. I like that a lot. That's a good perspective. I think Becky said this, and I think that I agree. I think the fact that Mark tells us that he loved him is pointing to the thing that this is not some kind of gotcha for Jesus. It's not like Jesus looks at his heart and says, I know what I can do to get you. Here are all the commandments of God. And he says, I've done all the commandments of God. And Jesus says, what can I do to get this guy? How can I trick him or do a gotcha? No, I think it's important that Mark articulates for us that Jesus genuinely, sincerely loved this young man who was coming after him to say, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus told him, this is what you need to do. And then in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, I'll just read from Matthew's account. When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Why do you think the young man went away sad? What's the problem here?
He already had something that was first in his life.
Becky said he already had something that was first in his life. Jesus is saying to a rich, young ruler, I want to be first. Demonstrate to me that I'm going to be first. And he said, no, this is first for me.
So you put another word up there, after rich young ruler, lost.
The rich, young, lost ruler. Yeah. I look at this situation and I think he went away sad, not because he owned lots of stuff. He went away sad because he had lots of stuff that owned him. And whether that stuff is tangible, what Ben was talking about earlier, this tangible I am trying to collect and have and get more, or whether it's pride, and what we will talk about with Luke, this is maybe the thing behind your social media comment, self and elevating myself, and I want to look good, who doesn't want to look good and show it off to the world? I think this is a sad story. Again, I'm back to the speculation. 100% opinion. I have no idea if this is true or not. But my guess is that if he had done what Jesus required and sold his stuff and chose to follow Jesus, my guess is we would probably know his name. He wouldn't just be the rich young ruler, which turns out after all these years is just as empty now as it was then. We would probably know his name, and he would probably be sung as a hero of faith. There might be a song in the songbook about him and how he put Jesus first. So how do we measure our success? We did the last one. The last one is Luke 12 and verse 31. Seek first his kingdom. This is how I would like to say that I measure success. It's not by my success or by my advancement in my career or how much I have or how famous or how popular I happen to be. Success should be measured in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 21. At the end of the road, whenever we hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. That's when I will know whether or not I'm successful or not. Not by how much stuff I have. Anything you want to say about success? Serving success as a God rather than serving God first? Yeah, Ryan?
I think all the things that we've talked about up to this point tie into faith. You know, one of the things that I pray about when I pray is I want greater faith. And it's not I need to believe in God more. I need to have faith that he is what he says he is, and he is going to do what he said he has done. So we put our faith or our confidence in money or success or youth. And we know these things are going to fail, but
Yes. Yes. I don't know if your comments transferred over electronics, but it's worth repeating that it's all about faith. And where do we put our faith? And is, where am I going to get my security? And all of these things. Where am I going to get my fulfillment? Where am I going to get my meaning and my purpose in life? All of this is about God, who is the one true creator of heaven and earth, who is capable of providing those things, and putting my trust and my faith in Him and seeking Him for those things, or putting my faith and my trust in some other created thing. Good comment. I appreciate that. I'm going to talk about busyness. This is, I think, worthy of being on a list of American Idol. And when I'm talking about busyness, I'm talking about getting all the stuff done. Run, 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 hurry, hurry, hurry. It is the American way. There's one Bible story that you have to refer to if you're going to talk about this. In Luke chapter 10 and verse 38, it's the story of Jesus in the home of Mary and Martha, verse 38. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, but listened to his teaching. Verse 40, I would tend to think in the world that we live in is worth highlighting and underlining in your Bible. Martha was distracted with much serving. Even the stuff she was doing was good stuff, but she was distracted from something that was more important. She went up to him and said, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. But the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion. This is the good portion which will not be taken away from her. God, can we agree on this? I'm running out of time, and so this might just be a head nod, but you're welcome to make your comment if you want. But can we agree that God and serving God is infinitely, eternally more important than anything on our calendar or to-do list? That He should be at the very top of every single day in serving Him. It's like spokes in a wheel. God and service to God and coming to church is not just another spoke among many other spokes in our busy wheel. God is the hub to which all other spokes are connected. I think I clicked the button there. Sorry about that. And the thing that I think about this busyness and the calendar and the to-do list, and I got lots of stuff to do and I want to do it all well. Cool. You got to live your life. This is a part of life. But the thing that we're talking about in this class is that it is not life. God is life. And so He needs to be first in all things. In terms of idolatry, I was thinking, what is something that we might say about this? If you're going to put something else, prioritize something else above serving God, you just as well take your calendar. Mine's in Google, so it would be hard to do this, but Becky keeps a physical calendar. You just as well take that calendar in your to-do list and melt it down and stick it into a mold of a golden calf and worship it. That's what's going to be first in your life. Anything else you want to say about busyness? Lastly, Ryan, this one goes along, I think, pretty well with what you were talking about. When I talk about politics, one of the things that I would say about idols and politics, Christians especially, in the first century, in the first and second generation of Christianity, Christians especially were criticized, and they were called atheists, because they did not believe in and worship and serve all of the other gods. You don't believe in the other gods. And so it's funny in first century writings and second century writings to see Christians referred to as atheists. But they were. And a lot of their criticism, the pagan criticism of Christians, was these Christians are not worshiping these other gods. And because of this, the gods are unhappy with us. And so anytime there was a drought or a famine or any sort of trouble that happened or insecurity within the empire, anytime anything bad happened, it was a Christian's fault because they didn't serve the gods that made sure those bad things didn't happen. And so that's at least opening a door into what I'm thinking of when I talk about politics as being a god. It's not just a little idol that we bow down to and worship and serve. This idol represents the world that we live in and everything that those people do. And so in Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 11, one of the things that I would point to is, here is Habakkuk saying to God, the people, the Jewish people that I live among, they are so sinful and wicked. When are you going to do something about it, God? And God says, oh, I'm going to do something about it, all right. I'm going to send the Babylonians, and they're going to wipe you off the face of the earth. And Habakkuk says, no, never mind. That's not, they're worse than we are. This is not what we want to do. But when God is describing the Babylonians in Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 11, one of the things that he describes about them is he said that their might is their God. The Babylonians are sufficient to provide for themselves and to do whatever they want to do. That's along the lines of your faith comment back there. If it was true for the Babylonians, how much more true could we say it is for the Americans? Our might is our God. We do what we want to do, and nobody tells us otherwise. And if you do tell us otherwise, we don't like that very much. Look at Jeremiah chapter 44, one last passage, and then I'll let you have the last word, and we'll wrap this up for tonight. Jeremiah chapter 44. I don't want to be this guy. In Jeremiah chapter 44, and starting in verse 17, Jeremiah is talking to these people and saying, put away your gods, put away these false gods, stop this stuff. In verse 17, we will do everything that we have vowed, make offerings to the Queen of Heaven, pour out drink offerings to her as we did, both we and our fathers, our kings and our officials in the cities of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem. For then we had plenty of food and prospered and saw no disaster. When we worshipped all these other gods, we didn't have any problems because the other gods took care of us. In verse 18, since we left off making offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pouring out drink offerings to her, we have lacked everything and have been consumed by the sword and by famine. And the women said, we will make offerings to the Queen of Heaven and pour out drink offerings to her. Was it without our husband's approval that we made cakes for her, bearing her image, and poured out drink offerings to her? I wonder, especially over the next month, if we're going to hear very many people saying things like, you had better serve your country or else. How about this? We had better serve God or else. Because our country, while it is nice, I'm a patriotic person. I love the United States. I'm glad I'm a citizen. I think it's even a net positive for Christianity in the world that we live in. But my country is not my God. And this is not my home, and it's not where my citizenship ultimately resides. That's my God, and that's who I serve. Amen. I'll give you the last word. Okay, I'm sorry I did so much talking tonight. I wanted to get through these points, but here is at least a last thing to consider. I sometimes say if you're here tonight and you're not a Christian, you know what? This is even true for you if you're here tonight and you are a Christian. Therefore, fear the Lord and serve Him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt and serve the Lord. If it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. You got to make a choice. You don't get to just sit there right now and not choose to serve either Yahweh, the one true creator, God of heaven and earth, or the other gods that we've described in this lesson. And if you say, no, I'm not going to make a choice, guess what? You've made your choice. It's not Yahweh. How many of you will say with Joshua and with me, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord? If you're here tonight and you know what you need to do in order to make that declaration, and we can help you with it, come forward as we stand and sing the invitations.